inform you on what happened during the 1971 Stanford prison experiment. Have you ever wondered why we act the way we do depending on the situation? Psychology professor Philip Zimbardo used the power of social situations to distort personal identities and long-cherished values and morality of some of his students that participated in the 1971 prison experiment. 24 men took part in this experiment as well as Zimbardo himself. All participants were male and selected based on who would be most psychologically stable and healthy. They were predominantly white and middle-class men and were chosen randomly on who would play the role of the guard or prisoner. Guards were given wooden batons, which were not to be used to punish the prisoners, but to establish their status. They wore khaki shirts and khaki pants to resemble that of real prison guards. They were also given mirrored sunglasses to prevent eye contact. Prisoners wore ill-lifting smocks and stocking caps. Guards called prisoners by their prison numbers on their uniforms, and they also wore chains around their ankles to remind them that they are prisoners. Zimbardo played the superintendent role, and he set up different situations to make time disorienting behaviors act upon the prisoners and guards. This information was found at the Stanford Prison Experiment Wikipedia site. The experiment was to test personality traits of prisoners and guards to understand the abusive prison situations. The researchers held an orientation the day before the experiment happened to go over the rules and guidelines and not to physically harm the prisoners. They were to simply make them feel bored and give them a sense of fear to some degree. The purpose was to take away the privacy and individuality of the prisoners. They were to have all control, and the prisoners were supposed to have none. The participants chosen to be prisoners were arrested at their homes and brought to the mock prison where they were charged with armed robbery, and they were given strip search and given new identities. The local Alto police also took part in the experiment. They're the ones that did the arresting. They did mugshots, the booking, and the fingerprints. This information was found at the experimentresources.com, the Stanford Prison Experiment. The experiment took place in 1971. It was held in the basement of the Stanford University below the psychology department building, and it was filmed the entire time. The prison was constructed by boarding up each end of the corridor, and they had a courtyard in the middle where they were allowed to do their recreational activity, eating, physical exercise. They were also had small openings through where they videotaped and recorded in each cell so they could know what was going on. They also had a solitary confinement room where they held one bad prisoner, which was about 2 feet by 2 feet, but tall enough for a bad prisoner to stand. They created prison cells by removing doors off laboratory rooms and placing bars. There were also no windows or clocks to judge passage of time, so this caused a lot of time disorienting behavior. The experiment was designed to last 2 weeks. It started getting out of hand, and Zimbardo let it continue. The prisoners suffered and accepted sadistic and humiliating treatment from the guards. Riots broke out the second day, and cellmates blockaded their cells with their mattresses. And after about 36 hours, some of the prisoners became very crazy and screamed and cursed and went into rage. Sanitary conditions declined rapidly, and the guards would remove the mattresses and the bedding and the clothing off some of the prisoners and make them sleep naked on the floor. This information was found at the Stanford Prison Experiment slide tour. The Stanford experiment ended August 20th, 1971, only after 6 days. The experiment results argue to demonstrate the impressionability and obedience of human behavior. The results are said to support attribution of behavior rather than dispositional behavior, which, in other words, the situation caused the participants' behavior rather than their inherent individual personalities. The guards and prisoners got too far into their roles and lost a sense of reality. Many of them were mentally affected by the experiment. 1/3 of the guards were reported to have very sadistic tendencies. Many of the prisoners were emotionally traumatized and severely depressed. 5 of them had to be removed from the experiment early. Some critics argued that the participants based their behavior on how they were expected to behave or the stereotypes they had about prison environment. They were simply engaging in role-playing. Participants internalized those roles as the experiment continued. Many found the experiment to be very cruel and unethical. It wasn't in actual correlation to actual prison environment, and the guards were very cruel and acted on unusual punishments. This information was found at the Stanford Prison Experiment in Wikipedia, also at The Quiet Rage, the Stanford Prison Experiment documentary. In conclusion, Zimbardo believed that the experiment showed the personality alterations people can have when given the position of authority. Social factors also determined how both groups behaved, with individuals acting in a way they thought was required rather than using their own judgment. The results of the experiment have been used in many high-profile court cases to demonstrate the regulations needed in a prison to prevent prison abuse. The Stanford Prison Experiment and its results remain very, very controversial to this day, and when the documented film became public, it left many people weirdly disturbed. The Quiet Rage is the Stanford Prison Experiment is the actual documentary, which watching this will explain the whole thing.